I'm always a student when it comes to things like this, the subject of cremation. And I'll just say right out at the beginning of this interview, I am old-fashioned to the bone. When I told Gary, when I interviewed him, when I said there's something about a veteran graveside service where there's a casket with the flag and the bagpipes and taps, and I know all the honors can be with a cremation too, but there's something about a flag draped coffin and the sentiment in that, and just to me it's just like water and wet. It goes together. I mean,
yeah.
And so that's where I'm coming from when I'm talking with you today. And I'll be honest, when I look around the world today, I'm very grieved by the percentages and the NFDA's projected statistics and on and on and on. And my big question to you, and then we'll unravel it, but why are we seeing such an increase in cremation?
I think there's several reasons behind it. First of all, you have a lot more people who are unchurched. I think you have a transient society. I think you have a certain amount of people today who view that as a waste of money, that when you're gone, you're gone. There's a lot less people attending church services than there has been over the years, and every time it's like after 9/11, churches were packed. And it has slowly decreased down and decreased down. And we look in our own community at all the churches that are in this valley, and yet, you know, none of them are basically full to the brim. And so I think that plays into effect a lot. And you have a younger generation that don't place value on that, that's grandma and grandpa's or mom and dad's idea of it, and it's archaic. And so I think all of those attitudes change into that thing and play a factor in it.
And it's a big business, right? You got to admit, cremation's a billion-dollar business.
Huge, huge. Yeah.
I kiddingly said to the folks down at Snyder's, I said, do you think there's some entity behind the scenes that just are jacking up the prices of a burial just so they can, push cremation? And I was kind of kiddingly saying that, but it's a huge business. I mean, you got to say it.
Well, and what you find a lot of times is that, funeral directors are probably their worst enemy, their own worst enemy, in the sense that you have employees who push cremation because it's a lot easier for me, okay? And cremation doesn't mean anything different than burial. It's a final means of disposition. And funeral directors, I think, do a big injustice to families who just go, we want cremation. All right, that's what, and they let it go at that. Do they tell them, you can still have a viewing, you can still have a funeral service? Are there family members that would like to say a final goodbye and stuff? And, granted, you don't have to have them embalmed to do that, but, most funeral directors, at least I've experienced that, was when they said cremation is what we want, then they didn't give them any of the options that were available to them. And a lot of people, in some ways, movies have romanticized being cremated. I'm going to scatter them here or there. And, that was their favorite place or whatever. And so it's like nothing is ever really there that says they were even here. There's not a headstone, there's not a marker, there's nothing that says they were here. And, you can drive around to any cemetery anywhere almost, and you'll always see one or two cars in there, and it's just a place where people can go. And I think that helps in the grieving process to be able to say that they existed. And so, a lot of people that would do that, and men are horrible. I mean, people that come in for pre-needs, we want to get this taken care of because we don't want the kids to worry about it or whatever. And the wife, well, I'd like this, this, and this, and does that, yeah, that's fine. And the man, 9 out of 10 times, take me out in the desert, let the coyotes eat me, throw me in the river, it doesn't matter. Well, it's not for that individual that has died, it's for those that are left behind. And I think that that's important, that you say to a spouse or children, what would bring you the most comfort and help you the most? And in the society we live in today, if you live in Grand Junction, Colorado, your kids probably don't live here. And so do they need the opportunity to be able to look at the body and go through the grieving process or anything like that? Or, all right, Dad was cremated and I'm overseas and I'll be back, but where's he at now? Well, we scattered him on Grand Mesa, where I was kind of up there at the top someplace, and, just the opportunity, there's a finality of being able to view that person and see, say your goodbyes, whether they're embalmed or not, and have that ability to do that. And the amount of direct cremation, no services, no nothing, I saw before I retired was on a huge, huge incline. And then they'd come in and say, I get upset because people come up and, how's old Joe doing? Well, he died. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, he didn't want an obituary, he didn't want this, he didn't want that. And, people don't know that, they're just concerned, but it hurts the individual that are left behind. So you see that more and more all the time, I think.
Like with my mom, I go to her grave, I was going like every week, every day when she first passed away 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And that point of contact is something that I will always have. And that's so for the grieving process and everything. But you mentioned the word romanticized. That, what didn't come up on my other interviews, that is exactly that whole Hollywood portrait of life and living, and how they don't depict things the right way, and it's not really real life reality. But I'm sad that there's been such a departure. And in my research of cremation, Mike, I went way back. I found that it was a pagan ritual that really at the time was just an outright like rebellion against Christians. We're going to burn the body. We're going to do this. That coupled with how the Jews didn't buy into it, the Catholics at one time. And I read somewhere where when Christianity came on the scene, the cremations at the time stopped. And I thought, well, what was in the Christian faith that would allow cremation to stop? And that coupled with my work with the Holocaust survivors. And all of them talked about the ovens. The ovens of Treblinka and Auschwitz and Birkenau and Buchenwald and all these concentration camps. My eyes were in. So even before that, I related cremation with the Holocaust and the crematories and the bodies and a means of just, to me, it's just unnatural. Address some of the history of what I just shared.
Well, the thing of it is like the Egyptians were probably the first to ever embalm a body, but you had to be of royal descent to have anything like that, or be extremely wealthy to have that procedure done. And it was not near like what we do today, but only the very wealthy or royalty was embalmed back there, and they would, again, most of them were put on cords of wood and burned and so forth. But, what you typically heard a lot as a funeral director was, well, it says ashes to ashes and dust to dust in the Bible. And I said, I'll give you $100 if you can show me where it says that in the Bible. And if that's the case, why was Christ put in the richest man in town's tomb? And they don't answer that. Well, it just says in the Bible, and it does not say that in the Bible. But, Egyptians, the way they did it and the way we do it today is totally different. And it's just, a means of easy disposal. If you look over in Ukraine now, the Russians, when they invaded Ukraine, brought in portable crematories because they didn't have the ability to transport bodies back to Russia or anything. And they were just cremating them, and, it wasn't just one body in there and stuff. And then, maybe you get 30 your son, or, half, or, and if you got anything back. And so, I'm just sitting there dealing with people, how much easier that someone who has a conviction in whatever religion it may be. I mean, they have a religious conviction to that, how much easier they deal with the death of someone and the ability to be able to grieve and have something that says, there's something after this life. And it really started bothering me that, when you're dead, you're dead. It's a waste, just all it is a body and it's gone and that kind of thing. And it felt like, to me, it was just like you'd throw out garbage. And, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, because everybody has their own ideas about what, house you like, car you like, food you like, or whatever. And some people, I guess, can live with that, but I'm kind of share your opinion in the fact that I'm more of a traditionalist. I want to be able to spend time with them before, they're buried or whatever, have the family ability to come in and say goodbye and that kind of stuff. I just think you heal better from it. And having that faith, whether it's Allah or God or whoever, gives you something to have hope for, that this isn't the end. And
well, a big argument for those in the Christian faith against cremation is the fact that when Jesus comes back, he's going to resurrect the bodies. The dead in Christ shall rise first. We who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with him in the clouds.
Right.
And meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. But and then the other scripture, the Bible says we are to glorify God in our bodies and in our spirits, which are God's. We are not our own. Right. And that whole mentality of the self-worth, just throw me to the dogs, doesn't matter. To me, that is nothing more than an attack on what God made good. Right. God created man and woman in his own image. Male and female created he them. It's an attack, and it's nothing, to me, it's an evolution, Mike. We've come from almost the dark age, well, not the dark ages, but we've come from a point where, traditional burial, 100 years ago, if we were having this conversation, we wouldn't be talking about cremation.
Not at all.
And to continue to throw into the mix, it's cheaper. Well, yes and no, but I asked Gary, Larry, and Tom, I said, if burial was cheaper than cremation, would things be different? And the consensus was no.
No, it wouldn't.
So because this excuse, it's cheaper, I'm not worth anything, where does that come from? That doesn't come from God.
But Larry, I've had some cremation services that are, I want to have them embalmed, I want to have a viewing, I want to have a traditional funeral service, and then cremate, okay? And I want to bury those cremains on his or her mother or father's grave or whatever. That was their wish. So it's not always cheaper, but, and you see this play into effect with a lot of people, like I mentioned earlier. When you leave any religion where you believe that there's an afterlife, then it becomes a disposable, and we're in a disposable society. If your TV goes bad, you don't call a TV repairman anymore, you go buy a new TV. If your microwave goes bad, you don't get it repaired, you go buy a new microwave. And it's just, we're in a disposable generation at this point in time.
And that is sad.
It is.
Mike, and that word, and you said it. I was hesitant to say it last time in the interviews, but the means of disposal. I mean, when you okay, without going into the process of what happens when you're cremated, but it's not a magic wand that's waved and then you have the ashes. It's an intense process to get to the point of the cremains. And again, my mind goes back to the Holocaust and how horrified those World War II veterans were when they came out of the camps and they liberated these camps. Yeah. And they said the ovens were still burning. Yeah. The bodies were still stacked up to throw into those incinerators. And I could never even begin to imagine my mother being placed into something like that. Now, the hard part for me saying that is those that would hear this and go, oh my God, I cremated my mother. I want to be cremated. But there's an education that has to come along the lines of this. And are funeral homes giving informed consent to these people? Do they know what they're doing?
Well, and that's the thing of it. I mean, it's like I say, it's romanticized in Hollywood. You know, they get the urn and they open it and they spread it in the water, or you know, throw it to the air or whatever. You know, when someone is cremated, it's not just a pile of ashes that's into that retort. You know, you can tell it's a skeleton, and you've seen pictures of, like you mentioned, Holocaust. There's a skeleton in there. Those skeletal remains are raked out. Magnets run through there in case there's any hip joints, hip sockets, whatever it may be in there, spinal rods, pins, all that. So that's all taken out. And then it's put in a processor that just pulverizes it into small bone fragment and dust, you know, and then that fits into an urn like at that point in time. But most people think, well, you know, there's just a little pile of ashes that you sweep up in there, and that's not true. It just is not the case. So, you know, you see that happening all the time. And my own dad says, I want to be cremated. And I said, well, you must not care about me or my brother or my grandkids or my kids. He goes, what do you mean? And I said, we want the opportunity, because we don't live here with you and see you all the time. We want the opportunity to come in and spend time with you and see you and be able to realize what has happened. I don't want to come in and just look at a box. It doesn't bring any comfort to me. And I said, so I think it's not fair of you to do that unless you ask those that are around you who are most affected, the ones that love you and care about you. Well, I didn't think about that. And he says, but I still want to be cremated. And I said, well, thank God it's not your decision. It'll be mine. And I just, you know, and, you know, I have nothing against it other than I just see, being in the business for 40 plus years, you know, who dealt with it better than others and so forth. But, you know, like I said, you got a generation now that, you know, I want instant gratification for everything, and that's a waste of money, and you're depending on something that's not proven, and that being God or a supreme power or anything like that. And I think that relates to a lot of it. You know, and it just becomes more and more popular. And you got, I mean, in Europe and stuff, there are certain places in Europe where that's the only means of disposition that they do on that thing, and basically it's because of space. I mean, you go to Europe and nobody has yards like we have or anything like that, because ground's pretty precious and stuff. So I understand the pros and cons of both things like that, but it's just not something that I personally would want, you know. And like I say, I go back to that adage, you know, ashes to ashes and dust to dust. It says it in the Bible, and you're like, please show me. And they can't, you know.
It goes back to the power of the human will and our choices that we make every day, right or wrong.
Right.
And also, just because everybody's doing it doesn't mean it's okay.
No. No.
But that's our society today, and the young people, and coming up through the ranks, and but to study cremation, the origin, and 2 times in the Bible, Mike, people were burned, and they're both in a war situation.
Yeah.
Saul and his sons, and in Joshua, a gentleman was burned. But it wasn't our loved one died, what are we going to do? You know, that's the choice in today's generation. The word buried or bury is used over 100 times in the Bible.
Yeah.
Over 100. Now, if we're talking about a biblical perspective of this, so you look at that. But again, just because everybody's doing it. But to me, I was in chapel at the hospital one day. I'd like to go there and reflect. And I was just talking to the Lord about cremation, and it's troubling me. And it's like, I feel like Jonah sometimes. I went to Tarshish. I didn't go to Nineveh and preach repentance.
Yeah.
And every time this comes up, it's like, I want to go back to Tarshish. But I'm in the chapel. I said, Lord, what? When I left the chapel, I heard these words. It's unnatural. It's unnatural to whether it's right or wrong. It's unnatural to cremate a body. Folks, it's almost like we need to scare people straight. I had a Vietnam veteran, a helicopter pilot, say this in one of my interviews. He said, he knows what burnt flesh smells like. And because of that, he'll never be cremated.
Yeah.
There's something to that.
Yeah. Well, and you hear people will say, all right, I have cancer. All right, I want it burned. You know, it's like a revenge thing against what your ailment is on stuff like that. But again, a lot of that is personal things. And I think regardless whether you want burial or you want cremation, the most important thing is to talk about that to those who will be left behind, who have to deal with that. You know, but again, like I said, you got a society out there today that just goes, yeah, why go to the expense? You know, it's a pain in the neck. I don't want to listen to Old Rugged Cross. That was what Grandma had and Grandpa had, or Beyond the Sunset, you know. And you yourself have seen that over the years with doing what you've done. Music at funerals is so drastically different than when I started. You wouldn't recognize it. And some of the stuff that you've seen done in celebrating a life or a funeral service or whatever you want to refer to it as has changed a great deal. And, you know, I've often thought how fun it would be to some point write a book about some of the stuff that I've seen over the years. And, you know, I mean, it was always hard because you know, as I said earlier, I always prayed that God, I've chosen this as my profession, but don't let me ever get hardened to the fact that these were human beings that lived a life, that are friends, that are family, or whatever. And I just got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. But there are times when there are humor that you would never, ever believe. And for example, I remember a funeral service that we had, and we had an organist that was so talented. You could call her up and say, you know, the regular church organist had a car accident, she can't be here, and she would show up looking like she just walked out of Vogue magazine, and you could tell her, you know, for prelude music they'd like Bach and Beethoven played, and for postlude music we'd like you to play big band music. Those were favorites of this individual. Well, the person who had passed away was passed away because of a house fire, and he had smoke inhalation and had been burned, and so it was a closed casket. And at the end of the funeral service, I'm getting ready to usher, and I saw the minister who had had 2 heart attacks, and he was behind the pulpit, and he was going like this. And I thought, oh, good Lord, he's having a heart attack. So I grabbed one of my associates and said, you usher. I went back, pulled him out from behind the pulpit, and I had an oxygen tank right there, and I thought, oh, I've got to get oxygen. I count 911, and he ran out the back door and started laughing. And I said, you know, you just scared the living hell out of me. Are you okay? And he goes, oh my God, listen to what she's playing. Well, she didn't know what he died from, and as people are coming by the casket and the widow and stuff, she's in there playing Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. I had visions of like 50 attorneys lined up to sue me. So,
you know, as you're talking, I'm thinking of so many things, but you know, peer pressure. It's like, you know, like I said, just because everybody's doing it doesn't make it right. But, you know, to me, the whole self-worth gets back to what God created good.
yeah.
You know, and who are we to just dispose of us like you said the word trash? Like taking out the trash, and nobody deserves that disrespect. No. I remember a service, 2014, Captain William Du Bois from Newcastle was killed, F-16 fighter pilot. You might remember that.
Right.
He comes home on the tarmac, and I'm out there with the camera. Only camera they allowed out there was mine. They brought the Kalita charter jet to us. They taxied in. They opened the door. They let down the ramp, and everything was like slow motion that day. The casket was on like a conveyor belt. It came up and it came down, salutes, flag draped casket. You can imagine what shape this man was, and he was burnt up in an F-16. They buried him.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I hear stories of, you know, one of my most chilling stories, I don't know if I've shared with you, is Gene Kelm. Gene served as in graves registration in Vietnam. He was a licensed mortician with Clarence Gerke.
Yeah.
They went to mortician school together, and he went into the military as a mortician and worked in graves registration. And with tears in his eyes, he had kidney cancer when I interviewed him. He died after that. But with tears in his eyes, Mike, he told me how they would positively identify the remains or the bodies.
Right.
Everybody. So when that body or those remains came back home to the United States, when they opened up the casket, that family knew that was their son.
Yeah, no question.
And such honor. If it was a finger, a foot, an arm, or a complete body, they buried the whole body. They had a casket burial for just a part of a body.
Yeah.
Shows me the importance of human beings.
Well, and you have no idea the discontent sometimes that can cause. And I saw this on a regular basis where, all right, this may be a second marriage. You know, first wife was buried or first husband was buried, and now we have a new spouse. And so there are stepchildren on both sides. And the new spouse says, we're going to cremate. Well, you know, mom or dad is buried out there and that's what they wanted. And no, we're going to go ahead and cremate. Well, that new spouse has full legal say-so on what needs to be done. And you have no idea how many discontented family members that you deal with when you do that. And it put me in a bad position because I would say typically, all right, you know, we could still have a viewing and stuff and cremate and put those cremains out there. No, we're just going to cremate. And so here are children, grandchildren, brothers, sisters, you know, nieces, nephews and stuff who are anticipating coming to say goodbye to, you know, uncle, aunt, mom, dad, whatever. And there is no casket there or anything else. There's nothing but an urn there, and sometimes I didn't even want that, you know. So, and I understand everybody's needs are different and stuff like that, but again, I just relate to who's going to be affected the most. That has to be the thing. And like I say, men just kind of have a, you know, it doesn't matter, when you're dead, and, you know, take me out the river and float me down to Colorado or something. And you know, I think that's not fair to those that are left behind. I think something that affects your well-being and your mental stability, like a death does, I think has to be shared with everybody to get their opinion overall, because they're the ones that are really left behind to suffer.
Yeah. Such wisdom you're sharing there. That I just so appreciate that. You know, I guess I mentioned the word like counseling as a funeral home director. You know, when families come in, you know, they want to serve the family and what their wishes are. But I kind of wondered if there's any type of counseling that goes on to families. Do you really understand what you're doing here, or do you just say, okay? I mean, I would almost be tempted to say, you know, you might want to think about this, you know, and what we're discussing here, and, or, you know, making it, you know, something to read. I don't know, in all the pre-need information out there, is there anything that compares burial with cremation?
Well, you know, like I said, funeral directors sometimes are the worst enemies, because you can't control and meet with every single family that walks in there if you have a firm the size that we had. But I always used to just say, well, you know, when you talk about cremation, do you still want to have a visitation where people can say goodbye? Do you want to have them dressed? Do you want to view them on a dressing table? Do you want, you know, and, you know, what exactly are you talking about? Because, you know, you can be cremated and still buried, you know, and vice versa, you know. So, you know, enlighten me to this kind of thing and stuff. And, you know, I tried to do that religiously simply because of the fact that, you know, cremation just means a disposition. It doesn't mean you can't have a traditional funeral service. It doesn't mean that, you know, people get to see him and say goodbye and stuff like that. But, you know, I think that sometimes funeral directors don't do justice to doing that, and I don't try to talk them out of it, and I just say, let me just make you aware of a couple of things. That, you may have family members that would like to say goodbye, and I'm giving you the ability to do that, and making you aware of the options you have, either with burial or cremation. And so I think that not that mine is the only way and right way, but I just felt like, you need to make them aware of what that decision or what that request was really about, because there are, funerals are something people have no clue about, and I'd be scared to death to go in a funeral home. Well, you should be more afraid out on the street than you are in a funeral home. But giving them those options, I had more people thank me for, I didn't know we could do this or this or this. And some funeral directors, cremation, good enough, that's what we're doing, and it's just done. Make them aware of what they have available to do that, will bring peace and comfort to those that are left behind. And so you have to do that. I think that's important, but as a society or as an industry, I don't think all funeral homes are that way.
And I guess down south, there's still a lot of traditional burial versus even Grand Junction, and so there's different areas of the country, traditions, this, that, and the other. So I see that. But when they're talking, NFDA's talking of, the projecting to 2030 now, and they look back at 2020, 21, the percentages, the states that are higher, I guess I'm troubled.
Yeah.
I don't know what you could say to me, probably nothing, but I just look at, God's word, and, the Bible says, to him who knows to do good and does it not, to him it's sin. I didn't say cremation was a sin, but it's kind of like we've made a law unto ourselves. But from a biblical perspective, though, Jesus was crucified, died, and cremated. No, he was buried.
In the richest man in town's tomb.
There you go.
Yeah.
1 Kings, I sought this out. 1 Kings chapter 13, verse 31. The prophet is talking to the people. Somebody had just died, and he says, when I die, bury me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jude, there's only one chapter in the book of Jude before Revelation. Verse 23 talks of snatching people from the fire.
Yeah.
And I thought, what am I doing? In a real way, as believers, we're in the firefighting business. We're saving people from the fires of hell.
Yeah.
And I equate fire with destruction, judgment, torment. What are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing with our families? But my whole point of saying all of that is people are not looking at it like that. They're really not making informed consensus a lot of times, because they're going with the flow.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And cremation started on the coastal areas, and it's moving closer and closer and closer in. You go into Kansas and Nebraska and places like that, they're still pretty much traditional. Midland America is still pretty much a traditional thing like that. But, even the older generations, you're getting less and less and less. I think we were running somewhere in the neighborhood of about 80% cremation, but not all of it was direct disposal, like we would refer to it as and stuff. But again, I think there's a multitude of different causes for that. Like I said, faith in any type of religion, disposable society, God is dead. This is the easiest way to do it, the most economical. And let's face it, right now you have a lot of people that are worried about the space. All right, we're never going to run out of burial space. But they use that as an excuse. I don't want to take up something, extra space. And these are the same people who are saying, I want a natural burial. I don't want to be embalmed. I don't want to be put in a casket. Wrap me in a sheet and just bury me and put a tree there. Seeing what I've seen in here, you can buy pods now to put a body in that has seeds in it. so that you bury that, and the disposition of the body, the decay of the body will help feed this tree, and you create a tree. You know, cremation, you can have the cremains made into a diamond ring. You can make, you know, you can have them shipped into outer space in capsules. I mean, it is just, you sit back and just think, oh my God, you know, this is just not what I consider respectable. You know, but again, I think some of that is, you know, it's kind of, you know, dramatic, and you see it in movies all the time. You know, I mean, we had a service where he was shot out of a cannon, the cremains. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, and you can get shotgun shells with cremains loaded in them, you know, and take them out and shoot them. I mean, it just, I don't know, it just got to the point where you think, my God, you've heard everything until this comes along. And it's just getting more and more and more. And people fall for this kind of stuff and then come in later and go, you know, I'm having a tough time dealing with this. Well, yeah, you know, it's just different.
It's unnatural.
Yeah.
Mike, Larry referred to a process where I'm wondering if cremation is going to be on a shelf one day with this water process of making mulch, kind of, she said, or I think Gary or Tom talked about freezing and then compressing. Are these coming down the line, or is this going to be another means where burial, cremation, freeze, mulch will mulch you? What?
Well, cryogenics, all right, Walt Disney was in a cryogenic lab. And basically that started in the early 40s. And they said, you know, at some point in time with all the medical breakthroughs, we can regenerate this body and stuff like that. And it's been several years ago, but they finally took him out of there. It was like $10,000 a month to keep him in a cryogenic lab. And finally buried his remains. But, you know, I mean, some of these new things there's some where you can put in there and chemicals will reduce it to basically a cream. And you can put it in, you know, whatever. And I mean, urns and stuff. I mean, I've used coffee cans, ammo cans, Harley Davidson gas tanks. You know, it just goes on and on and on. And I mean, that may be what they wanted and all that stuff, but I just viewed it, I've always respected it as God's creation. And, you know, you were made in his image, and I just think, you know, I don't want to put God in a Folgers coffee can or, you know. But, I mean, you stop and look at what we are today as a society and stuff that, you know, you and I would have thought never have done that. I mean, I went to high school, and every high school truck that was there had loaded guns in it. We didn't have that kind of problems then. What has gone wrong with our society? And it just seems like more and more you just sit back and think, you know, I can't believe what's going on today. It's just a different world.
Mm-hmm. Way different.
Yeah.
And to me, it grieves me when a veteran is cremated, just because of the honor, like I said, with the casket and the flag draped coffin. Folding a flag off of a casket to me is way more meaningful than just not. And so again, the tradition of that, the honor of that, and I think there's some things in life, Mike, traditions that we need to fight for and we need to hold on to.
Yeah. Well, and it's a constant battle, but you know, there is nothing more impressive to me than a full military honor, and you know, and deservedly so, because they gave of their time and their life for this country to be able to do what we want, say what we want, and that's all being taken away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it really is.
Yep. I'm just thinking, any final thoughts on this? We've covered a lot of ground here. Before I'm done, I just, you know, I guess I don't want to come off like, you know, Larry said it was a sin, Larry, you know, or Mike. We're not coming off like that. But I still do feel in my heart that it's not acceptable. I don't think I'll say that, I don't think God's pleased with it. Whether, you know, it's right or wrong in his eyes, Because I do agree with this. If somebody's blown up and this and that in war or whatever,
Sure.
yeah, God has the ability to raise
The dead.
yeah.
Yeah.
But as just a form of disposition, disposal, whatever the word is, a form of respect. I think it's honoring to
Yeah.
bury somebody. It's an honor that's going away. That's a
Right.
good way to say it.
That's right.
It's an honor that is slowly slipping away.
Well, and I don't want to be judgmental of anybody. I mean, you may like something and I don't like it, and that doesn't make you right and me wrong or whatever. It's just that I think that it's an injustice to insist that that's what you want when you have not considered those that are around you who are suffering. And I think funeral directors need to be more aggressive in being able to tell them, all right, burial and cremation just means that's what's going to happen to the body, but you want to be able to honor it, to say goodbye, to, and I don't care what religion you are, I just think that that's important to do so. And they, on the other hand, you may have people that go, well, I still am honoring them by doing this and this and that, but I saw families constantly that kept coming in there that would say, well, I wish they wouldn't have cremated him. I would have liked to have said goodbye or whatever. And I always gave them the option, we don't have to embalm them, but if it's within 3 or 4 or 5 days, they'll still look fine. I'll close their mouth and their eyes and shave them or do their hair and all that stuff, and you can still say goodbye. But a lot of funeral homes don't do that. A lot of them just go, oh, you want cremation? Boom, it's done. And that's the way you do it. And it is not always the least expensive because, most funeral homes have a selection of everything from a cardboard box all the way up to solid wood caskets. And so, and we've done that. It's just, I wouldn't put them in a cardboard box. Then the next family walks in, I'm not going to spend money on that. All I want's that cardboard box. And people even get upset with saying, you want, at that time, $75 for that cardboard box. Well, something they did not know at the time was that it had to have body fluids, and I can't go get like a refrigerator box and do it. And I'm thinking, my God, what's wrong with you? Well, why do you have to do that? And you don't want to get graphic, but you try to tell them, try to pick up somebody who's dead that has totally limber and get them in a crematory. You can't do it. It just, I don't know, there's just so much out there that people don't know about and is romanticized by, here it goes in and it comes out and then we go to the favorite lake, or this is where we first met, and we scatter them and I used to have to tell people, now you need to be aware of the fact that when you scatter those, there's a tag in there, 2 tags. One looks like a hospital bracelet and the other one's going to be a metal tag. Do not leave that wherever you scatter them. Well, why? Because somebody will find it and go, what is this? And it'll say, the name of the funeral home and have a number on it. Well, what's that for? Well, that's to make sure that that person, when we've picked them up, we've put an ID tag on them that says who they are. And then when they're cremated, that tag is cut off and put in with the urn, and a metal tag with a number is logged into a book here, so we know who that is anytime that's opened and who's in the crematory and who isn't. So there's never a chance of being mixed up. And you see stuff like here, we've had instances in this state. Look at Montrose. I don't want to say goodbye anymore. I've said my goodbyes already. And so what did they end up with kitty litter and cement? That body was gone to Timbuktu, or, they've taken the head, or they've taken the spine, or they've taken this and that and sold it. And we're going to give you a better deal on that. And so people go, oh, well, that'll help other people. Yeah, it helped the funeral home, and that's why there's licensing in this state is a joke. We used to get calls from other funeral homes out of state. Have you been to mortuary school? Yes. Are you licensed in other states? Yes. All right, then I'd like you to pick this person up and embalm them for me or whatever. And it's created a problem. And this one in Penrose is all, that's natural burial. Well, letting them set in there and decay, 150 some bodies in there, and you were ankle deep in human waste. It's just, I think if you love somebody, you have to respect them, and vice versa. Your wishes have to be, you have to ask for the respect of what they want. And I just think that that's vitally important.
Mm-hmm. Do you miss the industry?
I do. I miss being able to help people and interacting with them and stuff like that. But today it's just such a different thing that, I don't know. Like I said, the reason I finally just couldn't do it anymore. I'd come home at night and just sob because, these were friends or family that, you were close to or friends with and stuff like that. And it wears on you. It really does. But, I can honestly say I cared about everybody that I took care of, and I took care of them like they were my own. So, and I'm proud of the fact that I was able to do that.
That's why we like you, Mike.
Huh.
I had another question along the lines of your work. Oh, when you're working, did you ever think someday you're going to be one of the people that's going to be handled? I mean, everything you were doing, someday somebody's probably going to do all that to you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You thought about that? It's like...
Is that a scary thought?
No, not really. It isn't. I mean, if you and I were to go out to a restaurant today and you said, this is a friend of mine, he's Mike Blackburn, he was a mortician. Oh, I had a friend who worked at a funeral home and he didn't like it because it set up. In 46 years in the business, I never had a body set up. I never talked to another funeral home that had it set up, but you can't argue with it and just, oh yeah, you go along with that. Well, and I have to look at it at this point, that's my body that was created in God's image, but I'm not there. I'm in God's hands and God's care at that time, hopefully. And so, that doesn't bother me. And it's like when I was in mortuary school, one of the guys says, I don't think I can cut them. And he goes, you don't cut them, you make an incision. But you have to look at it like you have vintage cars. And that car wears out and it needs work on it and stuff. You're repairing it and making it so that it is visibly acceptable to come to grips with the fact that it's worn out, but it still looks good. And I always remembered that. And, I mean, even my wife, she was having knee replacement surgery and she'd come in to do this lady's hair and she goes, oh, she was always so sweet. And I just loved her. She was so nice all the time. And what happened? And I said, see that knee? She had knee surgery done. And my wife like, don't you say that to me. But, people's perception of what you do there is so different because there is a mystique about it. I mean, I've done tours for church groups, and one lady asked me once, can we see the room where you hang them up to drain them, And you're like, what? And they have no perception of that. And there's so many things out there that, people really don't know, and they don't ask. You sew their eyes shut? No, you don't sew their eyes shut. I mean, all this kind of stuff that people take as truisms that really isn't. You do it respectfully, and when you embalm them, and you have respect for who they are, and and you don't just leave them out on tables and stuff. You dress them and cover them and all that stuff. But there's just a lot of misconception out there about it. And let's face it, we live in a society, if you're growing up, you don't want to talk about death. You don't want to talk about financial problems or anything like that. So you take all these goofy things that people come up with, and people start to believe all of that stuff. And even the way you explain death, I had a physician once who lost his dad, and it was like a 4 or 5 year old child there, and the little boy said to his dad, who was the doctor, he says, what does dead mean? He says, that's the cessation of all cardio and respiratory activity. to a 4-year-old, and I pull him aside and I says, you know how flowers grow in the spring and how pretty they are and everything? Yeah. And I said, but in the winter, what happens? They die. He goes, yeah. And I said, but in the spring, they bloom again, right? And that's what Grandpa is going through now. His body's gone, and but he's alive again with God in heaven. You know, and he could understand that. But, you know, people have some real screwy ideas about stuff. I mean, you know, people come in, can I get some embalming fluid? For what? I want to put it on my nails because it keeps them harder to do that. And I was like, no, it'll also permeate your fingers and they'll be like leather. Oh, I didn't know that. I mean, yeah.
Come on, dear Lord.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It gets crazier by the day.
I just want to thank you, Mike. This has been a great time to be with you today, and just to listen to you, and having worked in the business 40 years, you know, you have something to say about this topic.
Yeah.
And I just hope going forward that I can help. I'll be honest, I just want people to know the truth with anything in life.
Right.
And there's a truth here that I don't think people see. I think there's a misconception a lot of times. It's you spelled out all of it, so I don't need to do that again. But the
consideration is important for those that are left behind. Number one thing, I think, you know, regardless.
That's good. And the remorse of some that cremate it and they just wish they wouldn't have.
Yeah.
Whatever. Maybe they rushed into it, but.
Well, and I want to thank you for all you've done for veterans, and you know, your constant effort to push forward of what they've accomplished, and what we wouldn't have what we have today without their dedication and service to us. And I think they deserve the utmost respect regardless.
Amen. I feel today we're fighting for the same freedoms in our own country that our veterans fought for, with everything that's going on.
I do too.
So it's us. It's like the mantle's been passed to us even. But I'm curious. So when you pass away, if you pass away someday, is your nephew's gonna take care of you?
He is.
Okay. And would you be here locally, or?
Yep. I won't be buried here, but
Price?
In Price, yeah, that's where my family's all buried. Nikki's family's all buried and stuff. We have lots there.
Okay.
And in fact, I told my mother-in-law before she passed, she bought a huge monument there. And she said, what graves do you want? And I said, I want it on this side. Then all I have to do is put Blackburn on the back of your headstone. No, you're not. So, but that's what I want. You know, and I'll have services here, traditional services, and then be buried in Price.
How old do you want to get, Mike?
Well, my cardiologist and nephrologist told me if I live to be 85, that'll be a miracle. But whenever it is my time, God has that. I don't know, and I just want to enjoy and be helpful and do stuff and enjoy my family and my friends and live life to the fullest as long as I can.
Last question. Or two questions. What do you want to be remembered for when you go? And also, what do you want to say to your family after you're gone? What do you want your family to remember about you after you're gone?
Just that I loved them with all my heart, and that I would do anything for them other than post bail. And I just want to be remembered as somebody who cared about people and my community, and that I always tried to do my best to do the right thing to everybody I served.
You're on my wish list if I die, as far as a service. And you said to me, I think it's Safeway, you said, well, unless I go first, but maybe we'll go at the same time.
Who knows?
Then who's going to do it?
We can hold hands.
Yippee! Oh, Geronimo. But yeah, that's good. Okay, we're done.
All right.
Let's shut this off.
Okay.
You did great.